Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you have had a good rest in terms of the break, and also would like to congratulate all those who have graduated during the Rhodes grad season. So this is our workshop as we are coming back since we took a month break because of everything that has been happening, including Easter weekend, graduations, as well as the break at Rhodes University. So welcome back to the workshop series that the Center for Postgraduate Studies is actually coordinating and facilitating. Just before we begin with today's discussion, I would like to, as we are reflecting on what freedom means to us, how freedom should be, and how we can do research that is responsive to societal challenges. So joining us today is Dr. Rin Oosthuizen, who is a senior lecturer in Community Engagement Division at Rhodes University. She's also a coordinator in Engaged Research and Engaged Citizen Program. Dr. Rin is an Engaged Research academic and a Rhodes University coordinator, as mentioned before. She holds a DPhil in Public Administration from Nelson Mandela University. Her research and work experiences focused extensively on disaster risk management, social and economic development planning and policy analysis, as well as monitoring as effective tools to ensure sustainable development. Dr. Oosthuizen is a certified UNESCO Knowledge for Change mentor. She was previously employed as academic dean of the School of Disaster Management at Steenden, South Africa, an international campus site for NHL Steenden, a Dutch university based in the north of the Netherlands. Before that, she was employed as a lecturer in the Department of Politics and Governmental Studies at Nelson Mandela University, as well as the Department of Public Management at Tshwane University of Technology, TUT. Dr. Rin has also worked as a researcher at the Institute for Sustainable Governance at Nelson Mandela University, as well as at the SABC. We are really delighted to have you, Dr. Rin, and also grateful for your presence and for the knowledge that you'll be sharing with us today. So over to you. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes. Hi, welcome everyone. I always find it so strange when people introduce myself or anyone else, then you sit there and you think, are these people actually talking about me or they're talking about someone else? But thank you so much for that lovely introduction. So yes, today's session will focus on research that is geared towards societal impact. And I also sometimes say it's doing research in the context of uncertainty. And because this is a seminar, I want us to first start off with a few discussion questions. And then I also want us to end the seminar off again with discussion reflection. So this is just an overview of what we will be looking at today. So I think let's just start with the seminar discussion reflection. So I think the first thing that I want all of you to reflect on is research engagement and engaged research, is it the same thing or is it different? And why, depending on your response. Research engagement and engaged research. So I'm not sure, maybe by raising hands or, and then if you can just check that for me.
Hi, Doc, I am checking. I don't see any hands. Perhaps if you can repeat the question, please feel free also to type on the chats, colleagues.
Yes, so it's the first question here in the slide. You guys can see the slides? Yes?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yes.
We can.
Yes, so it's that first question. Research engagement and engaged research. Is it the same thing? Or if it's different, how and why? Maybe just to start off. Anyone want to attempt?
Okay, let me
Okay,
try.
Hilma. Thank you, my dear. Okay.
Okay, I really
Let's
don't
see.
have any history or knowledge about research so much, but I'll try my best. Research
Okay.
engagement, to me, research engagement is maybe research that is involved or that has more involvement in the community or with people or with maybe where you are getting your information from. Research
Mhm.
engagement. It sort of like sounds the same. Engaged research is also research that is not just in isolation, but it's engaging different stakeholders, maybe for it to be possible. I don't know. Yeah, it
Okay.
sort of
So
sounds the same to me.
thank you, my dear. So are you saying it sounds the same, but it's different? Or are you saying you think it's the same thing?
I think it sounds different, but it's the same.
Okay. Thank you so much. Anyone
You're
else?
welcome.
Kotso?
Hi. So I think for me, research engagement is more about having your research open and available, and welcoming different people to add their input into your, well, not so much into your work, but discuss your research topic. Then engaged research is more about research that has an intention of engaging with, I guess, social issues, maybe. I think that's the key difference for me.
Yes, thank you so much, Kotso. And Hilma, thank you so much. So yes, you're actually spot on, Kotso. And Hilma, you've also added some elements to it. So you guys said, Hilma, you said it involves the community and who you're getting your information from. That would be research engagement and engaged research. You mentioned engaging different stakeholders, and then Kotso talked about with research engagement, it's where your research is open and available and, can allow discussion and people maybe to add their thoughts and share their reflections on it. And engaged research talks about engaging on social issues. Okay, so with research engagement, Kotso, as you said, the emphasis is actually more on the research. So you're rightly so. So the focus is on research and to a lesser extent on the engagement. But in engaged research, the focus is more on the engaged part of it. Okay, so it's not that your research is now the central focus, but it's more about engaging different stakeholders towards or during the research process. Okay, so you were spot on also with the second one. Second one focuses on research that is then geared towards societal impact, but that involves a multitude of stakeholders that's affected by the particular problem being investigated. Okay, and then last year I attended a conference and there was a retired professor that spoke at this conference, and I must admit I was blown away by his presentation. So Prof. Chris Brink is a retired South African mathematician and academic, and he wrote a book called The Soul of the University. And he said, or he asked the questions, why excellence is not enough. And in the context of his presentation, which reflected on this book that he wrote, he said universities have to ask themselves two questions. And he said the first one is, what are we good at? And the second question is, what are we good for? So before we unpack that, I just want to get your thoughts on it. So I thought maybe to start off by asking you, what are we good at as an institution in the context of research? So you can even type in the chat, and Asipe would maybe be able to just see that. So anyone just want to attempt? What are we good at as Rhodes University in the context of research? Anyone? Asipe, I'm not sure if you can see any hands or any comments.
Hi, Doc. I don't see any hands or any comments as yet.
Okay, thank you. Anyone want to try? What are we good at as an institution when it comes to research? Anyone want to attempt? I don't see any. Okay. And I don't want to call on people's names. Anyone wants to attempt? Guys, in the context of the seminar, it will be, I would really be much delighted if you can maybe just share your thoughts. So, as a research-intensive university, what are we good at? Nothing in the chat. Okay, thank you, Claire. Claire said we are good at publishing papers and producing PhDs. Okay, Michelle said, okay, thanks, Michelle. I'm not from the university. Okay, Michelle, I think it has to do with expertise in a particular subject. Okay, thank you so much. Michelle, so we're very good at that. And Claire says we're good at publishing papers, producing PhD. Puleng says we're good at producing new knowledge. Okay, thank you so much for your comments. Okay, so as a research-intensive university, we are very good at publications, as you said, creating new knowledge. We're also very good at having experts in the different subject fields or in the different disciplines. Now, the second question Prof. Chris Brink said we need to ask ourselves is, we know what we are good at. Okay, we are clear on that. We are a research-intensive university. He said then that the follow-up question is, what are we good for in this context of research that we've discussed above? Any thoughts? So we're good at publications, creating new knowledge, having the experts in the different disciplines or fields. So then the next question is, what are we good for? Any thoughts on that? Okay. Right. Okay, Puleng says, we're good for serving the public. Any other thoughts? Thank you, Puleng.
I can
Puleng,
add also.
Sorry?
Can I
Helma,
add a bit?
okay.
I'm
Yes,
saying
please.
since we are good with publications and we have experts in different subjects and areas of specialization, then I thought, what is this good for? Then maybe, I mean, there's no point of having all this if we don't have an impact in the society where we are serving. So then we are good for bringing new ideas in the society that can have impact on social issues that are, happening in the environment around us, maybe.
Oh, yes, thank you so much. Okay, so you're absolutely spot on, Hilma, that what are we good for refers to the findings of the publications or the knowledge of the experts or the new knowledge. How does it find relevance in society? Okay, we've had a few more comments. Good for directing social change. We're good at producing, okay, for serving the public. Why am I then? Okay. Silingeni. Okay, please forgive my pronunciation. We're responsive to immediate community needs. And then Michelle says, I agree. Mfonabong said we're good for directing social change. Okay, so thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and reflections. Okay, so yeah, as I said, he said we need to ask ourselves this follow-up question, what are we good for? And when he talks about what are we good for, it's the element you guys have just mentioned. He talked about when we look at the what are we good for as a public asset, how are we contributing towards the public good? And then he talked about we have to look at how responsive the research we conduct is to societal challenges. And in that same context, the research that we do, the findings of it, how does it have an impact in addressing or contributing towards addressing the societal challenges faced by not just the local communities in Makanda, but in South Africa, in the country, or in the province, in the country, and in the world. And he said, we have to start looking at, or also become good at providing the evidence that shows we are responsive to societal challenges. And in this context, he talks about, with what are we good for? We have to ask ourselves, how are we mobilizing resources and the expertise Michelle was talking about to address these societal challenges? So thank you so much for your thoughts on this. And then a further reflection would be, as we said earlier, public universities are public assets. And for that reason, they have to contribute to the public good. So it's in this context that we look at a university's social responsibility. And we ask these questions, what are we good at? But more importantly, what are we good for using the what are we good at? So it also beckons the thought or pushes us in a sort of in a direction where we have to start rethinking how we create knowledge and how we use knowledge, especially in the context of what are we good for? Because the what are we good for context talks about addressing real issues faced by a real community. So it talks about the relevance, the findings, how does it bring about a form of change in the affected community? And here it's just some keywords that I took out, the social relevance. Doc Mabizela always talk about we must be locally responsive and globally engaged. And in the context of university social responsibility, that's also key. And also looking at alternative perspectives of knowledge. And in the next slide, we'll talk about the knowledge democracy, which talks about these alternative perspectives of knowledge. So within the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, it has also become important then for universities to contribute more directly and more locally to addressing the issues faced by communities. So in this context, talking about knowledge democracy. Now, we had a symposium last year as well, and Prof. Budhol from University of Victoria in Canada also had a very interesting presentation. And he looked at how our knowledge base and the knowledge that we've gained over the years mostly comes from what he refers to as the global north. So it's more your developed world, your first world countries. And how the knowledge that we gain over the years is at times very limited when it comes to knowledge coming from the global south. And the global south referring more to the developing world. So knowledge democracy came about because much of the knowledge that is produced and mobilized throughout the world comes from the West. And it's for this reason now that the global south has now stepped up and said, but knowledge coming from the global south is not always valued and appreciated as much as knowledge coming from the global north. And this is also to an extent where engaged research also found its roots through the voices and opinions and perspectives of the global south, now also playing a key role in the knowledge that is produced globally. And I thought to maybe just also reflect on community engagement, the rules division, and the foundation that the work that we do is based on. So lots of times when I speak to students and staff, when they think of community engagement, they think we are heavily involved in outreach and in charity and fundraising. But the key pillars of the work that we do is based on two aspects or two key pillars. And the one is we focus on transformative community engagement, and transformative in the context that students who come through community engagement or get involved in community engagement go through what you can almost call a transformative process. So it's not just coming to university and getting a degree, but it's also in getting involved in real world practices and getting involved with people that are different from you, that face situations that are different from you. And to a certain extent, it's also through this where students also get involved in, your 21st century skills like creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, through working with community partners or community organizations in contributing towards addressing or solving the issues the partners are facing. And it could be at a school through mentoring and tutoring. So it's transformative in the sense that the student also develop skills and abilities through engaging with community partners, the community in general, and community organizations. And also a focus on lots of times, we talk about the soft skills, but we at times also refer to as the hard skills, which is also something we discussed in a transdisciplinary workshop last week. The hard skills around empathy, and also when you step into a community to first try and understand the context. So in a sense, it also transformed you as an individual. And when I speak to students, I also tell them that I started volunteering during my orientation week of my first year. And I volunteered up until my honors year. And when I completed my honors degree, I had a 4-year degree, but I also had 4 years work experience. And during those 4 years of getting involved in community engagement, and I mean, I'm talking about the 90s now, I also developed skills that almost prepared me for a career in academia. I became a good public speaker because I got involved in an organization that then at the time was involved in human rights education in marginalized communities, in schools, and in prisons. So I developed those skills and abilities through the community engagement activities that I got involved in through the Human Rights Trust. So that's the transformative part, that at the end of the degree, the student leaves a holistic person. So the student has got discipline-specific knowledge, is able to apply that knowledge in a real-world context, and community engagement gives the student that platform to be able to apply that discipline-specific knowledge in a real situation with real people with real issues. And as I said, it also adds to the development of the student as a human being and as a more holistic person. The developmental part of community engagement focuses on us being a bridge of connectivity. We know for decades, and I say to the students, if I reflect back on universities in the 90s, again, we were very removed from the communities. So communities always saw us as being superior, being the experts, and lots of times we read in literature, they talk about the ivory tower mindset of universities. And last year, we had a symposium, and the keynote speaker talked about him visiting relatives in Makanda, and they were talking about they don't regard Rhodes University as being part of the Makanda community. And that set off a whole bunch of discussions around why people felt that way, where they refer to Rhodes and they refer to the rest of the community. And in essence, Rhodes University is part of the Makanda community. But the community itself, they see us as being different and not being a part of the Makanda community. And in essence, it also talks around this ivory tower mindset where people view us as being different and acting in a different way, and at times excluding ourselves from normal community members. So that's the developmental aspect also that we focus on, where we are trying to be this bridge of connectivity to bring the community and the university closer together, because in essence, we are one community. And we have the issues being faced by the community are also the issues facing Rhodes. So there's sort of a collective concern that we share. If we think of the water issue, it's not unique to the Makanda community, but it's also affecting Rhodes. I can think of many days when there was no water on campus, in the toilets or around campus. And that just shows we are part of the Makanda community. And then collectively, and almost as a unit of analysis, we've got a shared identity with the rest of the community of Makanda. And it's for that reason that we focus now on bringing the university, the staff and students, connect them with the broader Makanda community, so that in the end, we can all view ourselves as being Makanda community and not Rhodes and the rest of the community. And I think the one thing COVID-19 has taught us is that all the issues that we face is complex. And even more so in South Africa, because when the first case was detected here in South Africa, we were already sitting with a crisis over the disaster ourselves. So it was almost like a crisis on top of a crisis. Before COVID came, we already had huge challenges with poverty, unemployment, gender-based violence, crime, issues around health and education. And then COVID came, and to a certain extent, COVID just exacerbated the existing problems already in the country. And at the same conference where Prof. Chris Brink presented, Prof. Ahmed Bawa also talked about it was a pandemic on top of a pandemic. So he said the pandemic actually pre-existed the COVID pandemic. And for that reason, it has become important now, and engaged research has really found its space now because of the complexity of the issues that we deal with, and the importance now that our research must be geared towards solving societal problems, especially now, as I said, in the context of COVID-19, and showing us actually how small the world is and how interconnected and interdependent we all actually are. And I thought to just briefly focus on this within the context of community engagement. Most of the work that we focus on is zoomed in, working towards the 17 interlinked Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, that was adopted by the UN and member states in 2015. And the key focus here, the drive behind the SDGs, is also the importance of global partnership, and that because we are interconnected and interrelated and dependent on each other, and COVID has shown us actually that just how small the world is and how all of us can be affected by one global pandemic. The importance then of doing this in a global partnership, but in a sustainable development context. So then the question is, we understand now that engaged research is research that focuses on addressing societal challenges. And to a certain extent also, when you get involved in engaged research, it's doing research in the context of uncertainty, but it's also becoming comfortable in not knowing and trusting the process and not the outcome. Because I know at times we tend to focus so much on the outcome that we forget about the process. And in engaged research, it's that uncertainty that we have to become comfortable with. And then through that, we start valuing the process more than just the outcome. So engaged research, again, it uses diverse, rigorous research approaches and methodologies. And the one common interest with all research methodologies under the umbrella of engaged research is it talks about that engagement with the community. And community-based participatory research, which is the highest form of engaged research that we offer in our short course, that talks about collaboration. So the focus here is on investigating societal challenges, but it's working with the community and not on the community. And then under the umbrella of engaged research, there are multitude of methods and approaches to be used, and I'm sure all of us have, at one stage, have used them. So PAR, applied research, action research, community-based research, and then community-based participatory research, which is the form of engaged research that we are currently working with. And as I said, it focuses on the witness with the community. So it's working with them, okay? We are trying to be equal partners with the community and not working on or in the community. And the key thing with engaged research is the issue being investigated as identified by the community. So it starts off by the community identifying a challenge or need, an issue. And that's where engaged research starts. So it's not me thinking, okay, and in Canadian informal settlement in Grahamstown, they've got an issue of, let's say, access to water or housing, and that's where it starts. So with engaged research, it starts by me engaging with the community first, and they will identify what the issue is, how they see the issue be investigated to then help with the research questions, possibly how they believe it could be investigated, and this could also assist with methodologies. And I thought to just bring this in, and this is community engagement and research, and it's what I spoke about earlier. So it's a continuum, and as I said, this is where we are, community-based participatory research. And as I said, it's the highest form of engaged research at the moment because it focuses on working collaboratively with the community. And community-driven or community-led, that is the ideal, and that is what we are working towards. And CBPR is also relatively new, so it's also still in its, its infancy stages. but it's the approach we are working with now. And other forms of community engaged research could be research that really focuses on consulting the community. You call them info participation, or it's merely informing them. But what I always say is it's important to meet students, academics, or researchers where they are at. Collaborative engagement with the community, that's the ideal. But it's important to meet people where they are at. And at times when you work on a project or research, it might not require collaborative engagement. It might require just creating awareness with the community. So you have to understand your research, the study, or the project. What is the main aim in involving the community? But as I said, CBPR is the highest form of engaged research because it's working collaboratively with the community. And in the context of engaged research or doing research with the community, the contextual factors becomes very, very important. Because as you can understand, working with the community, the witness, you become a part of it. You almost embed yourself in that community. It can only happen once there's trust, because as with any relationship, it doesn't happen overnight. So it's about building relationships. And once you've built that relationship and the community can trust you, it's only then that they can open up to you, and then it becomes transparent. The other factors to also look at is the equity factors. Because remember, when we go into communities, we already go in there with an upper hand, with more resources, the expertise. So it's also about balancing that so that resources are valued and appreciated coming from all of the stakeholders. But what I normally say to the students is, when we go into communities, and I've seen this, the communities look to us. It's almost how communities have been trained over the years. They look to us, and I've realized lots of times when I've got focus groups, then people look to me to sort of nod my head or to say something to sort of lead them in that direction. And lots of times I would leave the focus group thinking, how authentic were their responses now? Because they were looking to me now to almost guide them. And that's where the equity factors comes in, because communities have been taught over the years that, you know, people at the university, they are the experts, they know best. And it's for this reason that we've also developed engaged research series of workshops for community members. Besides the engaged research short course that we run for students, academics, and researchers, we've also developed the community engaged research for community members. So what we did last year was we started piloting, so where we met with community members so that the course can be informed by the community and again, not by a group of academics sitting in our office and deciding what we think the community needs. And with the engaged research short course that we developed, it's myself and 2 other academics from the rules division. And we've also included a community partner. So Monica is a community partner, and she's one of the facilitators in the course. So when we developed the course, we had academics, but we also had a community partner to bring in a balanced perspective. And we try and also get the 2 to overlap. So Monica also facilitates in the engaged research short course, and I also facilitate, and Tandy and Joe, in the community or engaged research workshop series for community members. So just reflecting on engaged research principles, important as with any community engaged research is the principle of reciprocity, that it's a 2-way street, so it must be a win-win for both. So there must be mutual benefit. So it can't just be about me wanting to collect data for a research project, and then everything is just one-sided. So the community must give, and for me, it's just about getting the data and then, you know, analyze it, discuss the findings, and I can publish or present it at conferences. There must be mutual benefit. So right in the beginning, it must also be clear how this reciprocity, how the mutual benefit works, so that as much as we go into communities to engage in research, what is the community gaining from it? Or will they be left worse off once we complete the research project? So the mutual benefit is the key pillar of what we do. And also engaged research is also long-term and future-oriented. In a certain extent, sustainable. And the reason why I say that is the community is a part of the research. The issue or the challenge being investigated was identified by them. So it's a real issue, a real relevant issue that they believe through research can be addressed. And by starting off this way, by them identifying the issue and making them a part of the process, as I said, we're not focused on the outcome, it's more about the process. Community members start taking ownership. And then far beyond us pulling out and not being a part of the project, because they've taken ownership, that builds into the design of the research already the key elements of sustainability. Epistemology becomes important because, again, referring back to what I spoke about earlier with the global south and the global north, and how knowledge production and the knowledge that we learned over our lives mostly came from the West and was regarded as being credible and trustworthy. The question we have to ask ourselves now is, whose knowledge counts? So we talk about the expert knowledge and we talk about the everyday lived experience knowledge. And we also have to realize not everything that can be quantified matters, but at times, because we look at objectivity and the quantification of knowledge, we tend to add less value or appreciate less things like indigenous knowledge and everyday lived experience knowledge. So in the context of engaged research, we also have to ask our question, whose knowledge is driving the research process? Can we find a balance between the two? But in the context that we currently operate in, and I mean, I'm also guilty of this, we ask students to include credible sources. So would we then say, Mpumi from Ikamva mentoring and tutoring program, her everyday lived experience with tutoring and mentoring, how is that credible? So that is the area we're trying to move in now, that more appreciation is then also shown for the everyday lived experience knowledge, the indigenous knowledge. So in the context of epistemology, it's important to then ask the question, whose knowledge? Because we also know knowledge production takes place in certain spaces and it's influenced by so many things. So it's also important in your own research or your own project or study to also ask that question. What is the knowledge base and whose knowledge counts? And then in terms of methodology, remember, as I said, because we're dealing with real people with real issues and they've identified an issue that is relevant in their lives, that they believe through research, can be addressed. It's important to also be cognizant of the methodology that you use, because ethics now obviously becomes key because the community is involved. There are numerous ethical challenges or concerns that comes up. So it's important when you look at your methodology to also bear that in mind. We can ask ourselves the questions, why engaged research? So it's about the integration of knowledge and actions, and important, it builds on the strengths and the resources already existing within the community. So we're not coming as outsiders and then starting from the base of our strengths and the knowledge that we have. We are building on the knowledge and the strengths and resources already in the community, because the point of departure is they will identify what is the issue. So it could be something like, as I'm saying, let's take in Kanini with a water issue. So I'm not going to go there and say, okay, so the main issue is there are no communal taps and people don't have any access to water. The community will identify what the issue is. So that is the starting point. And they will then address, let's say, a number of issues they are facing. And we could then say, so for example, how do you believe then through research we can assist? And then they might say, okay, so the issue around water is da-da-da-da-da. And through that, you start building the research questions. And because they live with the issue on a daily basis, they're actually in the best position to guide the research. Okay, so they identify the strengths and the shortcomings of the research interventions, because the people in Kanini, they live with that issue on a daily basis. And I'm just, let's say, I'm going there and I'm not clear on the area. I don't even understand the issues that well. So they're in the best position to identify the strengths and the shortcomings of the research. And as I said, important with engaged research to lead to real change and inform policy. also towards addressing the 17 interlinked sustainable development goals, research funding and publication opportunities, because the research is geared towards addressing real relevant community identified issues. And through this, again, for students also work on 21st century skills of collaboration, critical thinking, communication, creativity, and problem solving. And then, as I said earlier, under the umbrella of community engagement, there are engaged research, there are various approaches or methods to be used. And in the short course that we've developed for academic students and researchers, we focus on community-based participatory research. Because again, as I said earlier on, it's about working collaboratively with the community in the research process. And it's combining knowledge and action for social change. So within community-based participatory research, it's about an appreciation and acknowledgement for the knowledge as well as the resources of all of the partners involved in the research. And as I said, it focuses on real world issues, but it's working in collaboration with the community. So why CBPR? Again, as we reflected on engaged research, it's about real identified needs. It's forming of collaborative, equitable partnerships. And again, it's easier said than done. But as I said, when you look at the contextual and the equity factors, it's a process. It's not something that happens overnight. And I think we can all agree in the context of equity, it can't just boom happen overnight. Look at South Africa, 28 years into democracy and we're still struggling. So it's a process, but it's built on the premise that it's identified, the research problem is identified by the community. And in this instance, the community is the unity of identity, simply because of that shared characteristics and the identity that they have. We build on the strengths and the resources of the community. So we go into an area, let's say in Kanini, forming this collaborative, equitable partnership, but it builds on the existing strengths and resources in the community. And important, it's about co-creating knowledge. And this again takes us back to the global South, the production of knowledge from the South. So from an epistemological perspective, it's knowledge co-created, but in equitable partnership, in collaboration with the community that the research is focusing on. And through this, as I said earlier about the taking ownership, it's also about building resilience in the specific communities. So by doing this, we work with the community in developing interventions. So they're part of solving the problem. And for that reason, they do take ownership with capacity building and empowering. But again, when we look back at reciprocity, in this time that I've been involved in engaged research, I can honestly say to you, I've learned so much. And that's the beauty of engaged research. All the community partners that I've worked with, I can honestly say I've grown as an academic, and also my practical knowledge of what happens in reality. So I've also, just like the students, I've also had this real world exposure. And that's the beauty of engaged research. It's not just us going there and thinking we capacitating and empowering them, but it's also about us also being capacitated and also being empowered. Because what I've learned by being involved in engaged research, there are certain things that I can't find in a book, in a journal article, I can't find in the library, because it's everyday lived experience. And at times, I sit with community partners and I'm truly amazed. And I actually go with a notebook and I make notes, because it's the everyday lived experience knowledge. And I think it goes back to what Asipe said earlier about Freedom Day. 28 years down the line, can we say we are truly free? And when I think of this, I'm thinking now from an epistemological perspective, in terms of knowledge. In all my years at university, I've always been so focused on my knowledge base being based on expert knowledge, credible sources. But I can honestly tell you, through engaged research, my knowledge base has grown exponentially. And I can also see myself now as a more holistic academic. And also in my engagements with students in class, I'm also able now to take, that everyday lived experiences and then link it to theory being discussed. So it goes both ways. Also about the sustainable interventions. And as I said, because the community takes ownership, that is vital, so that they don't become dependent on us to be running or be involved in the project forever and ever and ever. So at some stage where the university pulls out, because they've taken ownership and they've been a part of the research process, okay? Then this is the elements of sustainability then comes into play. And important, as I said, what Chris Brink asked us is, how do your findings inform societal challenges or the issue that was investigated? And that's the key thing here as well. It's the results bringing about change. And this happens in the context of social justice, environmental justice, but so many other issues that our communities face. So maybe to just get back to what we do. So in the Roos division, as I said, we've developed an engaged research short course for academic students and researchers. And there's a fee waiver. So we offer this for free to academics and students. And it runs over 5 weeks. And these are the key issues that we look at. So it's all online. It's an online course with pre-recorded lectures, and there's readings. So we meet once a week over the 5 weeks, every Friday from 3 until 4:30, again, virtually. And each module has class activities and an assignment. And then in the Friday plenary discussion sessions, we focus on those activities and the assignment, and we have discussions around the topic for that week. So it runs over 5 weeks, and then the final assignment is a research proposal. And what we also try and do is we want participants to focus on a research proposal, let's say with students, for a proposed project or study you want to get involved in, and the same with academics and researchers. So that after the course, you can actually use the proposal then for whichever study or project that you want to get involved in. We offer the course in every year in term 2 and in term 3. Also looking further at, besides the short course that we offer, like the seminars, one of them that I get involved in with the Center for Postgraduate Studies, we do offer capacity building workshops for departments, academics, researchers, students, who wishes to engage in this kind of research that is geared towards addressing societal challenges. We also will assist you in providing support and guidance. If you want to get involved in the engaged research project, we can assist you with designing it, also the different methods that you could look at. And we also can assist you with the forming of partnerships. So with quite a few academics this year that have approached me, let's say it's computer science or it's pharmacy. And so then I try and connect the academic or the student with a community partner. So for example, with computer science, I've linked them up with, we have one place called Elikweni. It's a place of safety for boys. And they've had quite a few issues with their operating systems. Okay, so I took one of the academics there to have those discussions. And then from there, the research the students will be working on is then informed by a real issue faced by that community partner. So if you are keen, you can also approach us for to assist you with the partnerships. And as I said earlier, it's about the relationship building and that forming of trust. Then also looking at ethics, as you can understand, our ethics process then looks at, you submit a proposal, but then in the proposal, you would already have identified the research problem. There's a problem statement, you've got research questions, you've got your design. So when we developed this last year and we piloted, we had quite a few discussions with Prof. Arthur Webb, who's the chairperson of our ethics review committee, to just say, look, Prof, the challenge we're sitting now with is we can't develop a proposal if we have not engaged with the community. Because as we say, engaged research is based on the premise that the problem must be identified by the community. So we've had a few discussions with him, and the agreement that we have now with the ethics review committee is a 2-tiered ethics application process. So what happens before, what he suggested then is, what first needs to happen is, if you're going to get involved in engaged research, you first need to write a letter. So the letter is the first part of this two-tiered application process. And then in this letter, you state that, you give a sort of a broad overview. And again, I'm just going to use my own area of research that I focus on. It's disaster risk management and development planning, but it's more about the integration of risk management into development planning. Okay, so broadly stated. Okay, so I don't have a research problem. I don't have any questions, nothing. But I need to engage then with the stakeholders, and here could be the community, the local municipality, the district municipality, the province. So up until I've engaged with them, I don't know what the issue is, so I don't know what I'm going to investigate. Okay. So in this context, you send a letter to him now, broadly identifying the area, okay, who the key gatekeepers are, okay, and why those specific gatekeepers. So remember, in all research, there's normally one gatekeeper that opens the gates to everyone else in a school. Okay, you can approach the district, but if the principal is really going to be headstrong and against it, I mean, you're just wasting your time. Okay, so in my context then, with disaster risk management and development planning at local and district level, the key gatekeeper then is the head of the disaster risk management center in the district. So that would be the first person I need to engage with. And then through him, he's going to start identifying issues that will then inform the proposal or the research project. And if he gives the go-ahead, then it's easier then to engage with the other gatekeepers. But the reason why we need to send this letter to the Ethics Review Committee in the beginning is, if the information or the data collected from the initial engagement will be used for research or publication purposes, then you need to get some form of an approval or permission to do that. Okay, so then that letter gets sent, Prof. Webb goes through it, he shares with the Ethics Review Committee. They might have some questions, send it back to you. You then resubmit. And once then they are fine to grant you approval or permission for the initial engagement, okay, then you can actually go out and do that. But then they also know when you submit the proposal is informed by the community, because in the initial engagement then, as I said, the community would identify the issues, the challenges, possibly how it could be investigated, possibly also guide you on methods that would be most appropriate. And then you submit your proposal. So by the time the proposal is submitted, because of the letter, the Ethics Review Committee would be clear to see here that, the gatekeepers have been consulted, they've identified whatever the issues may be. So that is the process that we are working with at the moment. Also still, I must admit, in its pilot stages, but Claire, who's present here today, has submitted such a letter to Prof. Webb. So Claire, if you don't mind, would you just briefly share with the rest of the group?
Sure, Renee, can you hear me?
Claire. Yes, we can. Thanks, Claire.
Okay, so we've had a lot of guidance from Renee and also from Prof. Webb, who's the head of the ethics committee. And he gave me a brief description. So it was really quick, actually. It was about a one-page letter that I wrote. And in general, I just outlined the people who I wanted to approach and the kinds of questions I wanted to ask in this initial meeting. And he suggested that those questions should be as general as possible at this stage. So, we haven't come up with research questions yet. We're still in the initial processes of coming up with our research conceptualization. So keep it as general as possible for now so that you can begin to explore various different aspects. So it was really simple. I just outlined why we wanted to approach various people, who we wanted to approach, and what in general would be the questions we would ask. And I was able to email that letter through 10 days before the ethics committee meeting. And exactly 10 days after I sent that email, I got my acceptance.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, Claire. Much appreciated.
Sure.
I'm just looking at the chat group as well. Because the course is running at the moment, but you can join for term 3. So if you can just send me an email if you are interested, and then I can just add you to the list for term 3. Then I'll just send the application form and documentation needed. And with staff and students, we also normally also ask you to write a motivation letter that we can also use for the fee waiver. So yes, you can definitely join for term 3. And then Michelle said, there's sometimes a helplessness in society, I agree, which makes them unable to take charge. Example, safety fears, criminal intent. Love your take on the lived experience. This makes your engagement with the person and community more hopeful, and they feel understood. Thanks, Michelle. Okay, this is just from, let's see here, okay. Okay, outside of the university, yes, yes. But then unfortunately, we'll just have to talk about the fees. So maybe you can also send me an email, and then we can just have an offline discussion if it's an academic or student that's outside of the university, but definitely we can discuss. Cool, cool, okay, thanks. Right, right, so that's it. And then I thought, okay, that's just the reference list. Then I thought, maybe for your own research, okay, Lindelma, you can go ahead. Lindelma, can you hear me? I can see your hand is up. Ah, you can go, my dear. Can you guys hear me? Claire, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay. Lindelma, can you hear me? Maybe Lindelma, we can't hear you. Maybe just type it in the chat. I'm not sure if you can maybe hear Lindelma, but I can't hear anything.
I'm not at all, Doc. I think Linda can just, log out and log in again. Oh, okay. Linda says they'll type
I'll type it out. Okay, cool. Cool. So then while Linda was doing that, I thought maybe, and I would love for some of you maybe to share your thoughts. Maybe if you can reflect on your own research, research that you've done in the past, or maybe research you are considering doing in the future. And again, when I reflect on my own research, my studies throughout the years and research projects that I've done with students, sometimes I get ashamed when, when I got involved in engaged research, there were times really when I reflected, and I have to admit, a lot of the stuff that I did was extractive. And especially in the context of disaster risk management, where, you delve into people's vulnerabilities and the hazards that they are facing and how the vulnerabilities impact on them. And, looking at how communities can become more resilient and, capacitated so that they are able to mitigate or be more resilient against the hazards they are facing. And it could be, your natural hazards like flooding, like what we've seen in KZN, or it could be social hazards that we are facing in the country. And so when I think of it, how people shared very personal things with me over the years and how I never went back to that community. So I was there really in the moment to collect the data. And that data was useful for me for either a publication or a conference or something I had to do. But I was there in the moment thinking that I need to get this data from all of them so that I can get back, analyze it, and then just, look at the findings and see where I can actually go and present the findings. So when I look back at it now, I never really went back to those communities. And that's the sad thing. And when I also reflect, there were quite a few communities where I went back to the same communities. And they didn't ask me to say, oh, the last time you were here, what happened to that? They open up again and they share things in their mind. They're thinking, okay, she's coming from the university, so the university is going to make a difference. So I've also had a lot of things I had to unlearn. And at times, I also find myself when I'm sitting with community members and I want to speed it along. I'm thinking, okay, should I just ask a probing question, but in that question, guide them towards what I want from the project? And I have to say, Renee, take a step back, take a step back. So I must admit, over the years, I've also had to do a lot of unlearning that, I must trust the process and not be focused purely on the outcome. Let's see what I always say here. Okay, that's Michelle. And Michelle said, do you think sometimes you can identify a problem in your research question and inadvertently engage the community at a level you never expected? I think that happened to me. Michelle, it would be lovely if you can share that with us. I'm really interested. Michelle, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm switching on. You can hear me.
Thanks,
So
Michelle.
I'm actually very sick, so I hope that I can talk. So I haven't been talking because I've got my throat is like, I'm hoping I don't have COVID. They're
Thank you
coming
so
in
much.
just now. Yeah, it was actually fascinating because my area of research is in sleep. And we actually interviewed two different, more than two, there were about 4 separate groups of women around good sleep and bad sleep. And it's, that's what my work is. And it really took me by surprise because the one group who were unemployed Black women who came from the valley quite close to where I live. And yeah, I must say, I was completely taken by surprise. And I did the same thing where I had gone there with all my research questions, and the previous groups were easy because I had my questions. We asked them, the woman talked into them. But there were actually 4 separate groups. They didn't just speak into it. They were very distressed. They became quite emotionally charged. And most of what, you couldn't get them to talk about sleep. They talked about the distress in the community, the inability to, and they were talking about sleep, but in a very innuendoed way, about how they had to be up all night to check to make sure their daughters were safe because they were worried about the community where the men would get drunk, and so, yeah, I mean, that's just a small example, but I had to change gear completely. And now I'm analyzing it and I'm kind of going, So I wish I'd come upon your method like 3 years ago, because, then one goes into the community with I can see with a completely different lens. So this was all using RPA, interpretive phenomenological analysis, and that's all about lived experience. So I really related to that when you started talking about that. So that was just what I wanted to share. And thank you for a very, very interesting talk. But it does make me go,
Thank
gee,
you
I wish
so
I'd known
much,
about
Michelle.
that before I got that far.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you sharing your reflections and thoughts with us. And I normally say to the student, there's one community partner, Mom Margaret, and she's involved in a place of safety for young children. And she's been doing this for more than 30 years. And I'm telling you, every time I go there, I really go with a notebook. Because when she opens her mouth, it's like pure gold coming out of her mouth. And I can't find it in a book. And I must really tell you, some of the lectures I've had, a lot of it, were informed by her everyday lived experience knowledge. And it's things that I would never, ever have thought about. And what I've learned by engaging with community members, sometimes we make things so complex. But when people like my Margaret speak, it's like, just through the few things that she said, it's like, wow, she's done this for over 30 years, and it's kids that come from difficult upbringings. And some of them she's raised from the time they were 3 years old up until they finished matric. And she told me there's this one boy who qualified as a civil engineer at UJ last year. And he came there when he was 3 years old. So she got this boy through school. He performed well, was able to register for a degree in civil engineering, and is a qualified civil engineer today. So I think, yeah, Michelle, as you say, it's that authentic feeling of being authentic. And that's what I think when I reflect on all my years as an academic and a researcher, that if I'm just being critical and honest with myself, the authenticity wasn't always there. And what I've also noticed with community members is they can pick up when we're not being authentic. Because lots of times we go in there with a set agenda. I want to collect this data and I've got a plan. And people can pick up when you're not being authentic. So that's why I've realized getting involved in this requires a person to be authentic and to really be committed, because it's real people with real issues. So thank you so much for sharing, Michelle. Okay, cool, Pauline. Thanks, Michelle. Okay, so I thought to maybe just leave you with final thoughts, maybe for your own research or research that you're thinking of embarking on in the future. Maybe to just ask yourself, the issue under investigation, how was it identified and developed? And remember what I said, it's about the process, trusting the process and not being fixated on the outcome. Like I said, in my case, it was my students need to either get a master's or it's me getting a PhD or whatever the case may be. Lindelwa, can you hear us now?
I think I can. Can you hear
Cool.
me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, I've already kind of written down my comment, but I just wanted to know if there's anything that you do to actually support people from these communities that are already doing, the research themselves, because like I'm an anthropology major, I'm doing my PhD in anthropology actually, and right now we're talking about how community people or indigenous traditional people are knowledge producers in their own rights, but like the systems that we have in place do not actually allow them to be knowledge producers unless they are associated with someone from a recognized university, or someone like yourself, or the people that work in NGOs and that sort of thing. So are there mechanisms in place to actually assist people that are already doing their research, or they have ideas as to what it is that they want to investigate in their own context? And also, what about programs in place for academics from those communities? Because most of us, I'm one of those people, like, so every time when you say community members, to me it's like, well, I'm the community member, that you're talking about. But I'm also a PhD student, and the research that I'm doing, it's basically related to some of the events and the circumstances that I experienced myself. So I'm not an outsider, in this situation. I am an insider. I don't actually need to go in there and be all sensitive and all of that about the subjects, because I lived it, and the people that I'll be engaging with are people that know me and understand me. So like some of these guidelines that you provided, that not really relevant for someone who is in my situation. So what is it that you do to actually support people like that? Because there are more and more academics from these areas that are coming into this field, but we find that when we get into it, we are expected somehow to change even our way of thinking, even like our approach to the subjects, so that it would fit, like the epistemologies. And basically the approaches that the systems that are in place have set up. So is there anything right now that is happening within community engagement that encourages that supports that allows these communities to be independent and have their autonomy, and not feel like they always have to be associated with someone else for their knowledge to be recognized, for their voice to be heard, for them to express their own nature, their own ontology, the way that they see it? Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you so much, Lindelwa, for your thoughts and your comments. Maybe let me just start off with public universities, and I'm just going to be honest and frank now. The structures and systems are not yet in place to fully support this. That's why I'm saying it's still in the baby stages, and there are still quite a lot of teething problems. But I'm very happy that Prof. Webb was so open-minded, and it's almost like we are now like the pioneers in the context of ethics, because we all know how strict ethics is. So for me, the fact that Prof. Webb has been open-minded and now allowing a two-tiered ethics application to allow engagement with the community to inform the proposal submission. So that's the one part. But yes, it's still a process moving forward, because it's something that really needs to happen at a strategic level. So a lot of academics and students are also a bit resistant, simply because of all the walls and the stumbling blocks to really get involved in this. Then, as I said earlier, our community partner, Monica, is developing the engaged research set a series of workshops for communities. And I'm also facilitating on it from the university perspective. So I have like one unit, one module in it that I'll be facilitated, but it's completely community driven. And Monica is one of those community members that she works for an organization called the Learning Trust, and she's heavily involved in research. So she brings us in to facilitate, but it's something completely driven by the Learning Trust and by Monica herself for our own studies. Then the other, from a community engagement perspective, we annually have either in BIZO or symposium, where we actually allow community members to present. And it would be lovely, Lindawa, if you maybe want to join our Imbizo. It's actually happening on the 11th of May at Amazwi. And this creates a platform for community partners and also for students to reflect, on not just a building of community partnerships, but also to look at it in the context of research, for example. So community partners will be presenting at our Imbizo, and it would be lovely if you are free to join us to actually see how the Imbizo is driven by community partners and students and not academics. So there's no academics presenting, it's purely community partners and students. And so I absolutely agree with you that, spaces needs to be created to allow this authenticity coming from the community in the context of research, and not just always to be connected to us for it to have relevance. But in the university context, things like knowledge and everyday lived experience, it's still not valued, regarded on the same level as expert knowledge. So that, as I said, is still a process. Then, as you were referring, we are part of the community. And I started off by saying Rhodes is a part of the Makanda community. And you also bring up a very key issue where you are part of that community. So in a workshop you had last week, we were talking about how some methods almost like forces the researcher to act as an outsider, when in essence it should not be. So whether it's you that are from the community or me that's not from there, the key issue is around the authenticity. And it's not whether you are part of the community or not. So in this context, being authentic, it means your input, your perspective should also be valued. And you shouldn't just be seen as an outsider where it's just the community, but technically, as you said, in your example, you are part of the community. So for me, the key issue is around the authenticity. But I would love to, Lindawa, for you and me to all have discussions offline. So you could send me an email and then the two of us can maybe set up a meeting and we can discuss. But I absolutely agree with you, yes. You should be a part of it and not be set to a different set of standards, which almost makes you as an outsider because you're a PhD student or you're an academic. Key for me is the authenticity. So your contribution for me is just as important as any other member of that community, which is the unit of identity or analysis for the research. Thanks, Lindawa. Tabelo, I think this will be the last comment. Yes, Tabelo, go ahead. Tabelo, can you hear me? Cool. Oh. Lindawa, no matter, we can even meet via Zoom. So if you can send me an email, then we can set up a Zoom. Cool. Thanks, my dear. Tabelo, you can go ahead. Tabelo, can you hear me? Michelle, can you hear me? Hello? Oh, can you hear me? Cool, thanks. Tabelo, I can't hear you. Maybe unmute your mic. Tabelo? Tabelo, maybe type in. I'm not sure what to do now. I'm not sure if Tabelo can't hear me. But maybe then just in the last few minutes, let me just then say, so as I said, yeah, maybe just reflect on your own research or research that you're considering embarking on in the future. Maybe just identify how the issue under investigation was identified and developed or will be identified and developed. What would be the level of involvement in the community in the research process? And remember, as I said earlier, It's important to meet people where they are at, right? So I think it would be unrealistic to expect that in the beginning, the problem is identified and, right up until the end of the research process. That is what CBPR talks about, but for me, it's important to meet people where they are at. And also important in terms of the research findings, this is the one thing I still wanted to add. It's also how the findings will be disseminated. So remember, when you're working in this multi-stakeholder group, okay, you have to look at different methods of how the findings will be shared. Like in my instance, for example, the way I would have shared the findings with the municipality cannot be exactly the same method I would use for sharing the findings with the community of Nkandla. So it's important in the dissemination that the methods of dissemination used is relevant and it'll be meaningful for that particular stakeholder. Okay, so how the results of the study will be communicated, important how the results will bring about change in the selected community. And if it's research that you've done previously, the way I've said, I've reflected on my own research over the last few decades, a lot of unlearning, maybe just to ask yourself the question, what could have been done differently? What were the lessons learned? Asif, and I think that's my 2 cents for today.
Thank you so much, Doc. Thank you so much for, sharing your knowledge, your research, and your understanding of what it means to be an engaged university as Rhodes University, and what it means to do research at Rhodes University, especially research that includes, community engagement. As I am sitting here, I'm just reflecting on a lot, in terms of personal experiences, and most researchers usually research on personal lived experiences and also research that includes the community. And as one of the participants has mentioned that they are the community themselves, so it's quite important to always remember that as we are going into communities. So thank you also for your reflections, on community engagement. That is research that is more relevant, translatable, and sustainable, and also your reactions on how community engagement in itself as a research is anchored in mutual interest, the need as well as respect between the researcher and as well as the participants. Thank you so much for sharing that. And also thank you so much for everyone for bringing in those robust engagements, questions, and concerns when it comes to this important research. And I wish you all the best in terms of your research. So thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you, Doc, for making your time and for the presentation. Just to ask if you would be really comfortable in sharing your presentation with us. Usually the participants would ask for the PowerPoint that should be shared together with the recording. And also to remind the participants about the link that I've put on the chats, which is an evaluation link for our workshop, so as to make sure that we are giving everyone the support they need in order to continue with their research. I will see you all next week as we will be having our weekly workshops from now on. Have a beautiful Thursday. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Doc.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye.